Levin comes to us today from New Mexico, where she teaches at the Santa Fe University of Art and Design. She has an MA from NYU in creative writing, and her work has won numerous awards. Just to give you an idea, her first book alone won the American Poetry Review Honickman First Book Prize, selected by Louis Gluck, the John C. Zacharias First Book Prize from Plowshares, the American Academy of Arts and Letters Witter-Bynner Prize, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing these correctly, and the Penn Osterwil Award. That's 4. That's the first book. Since the appearance of her first book, In the Surgical Theater, in 1999, she has published 2 more collections of poems, Wedding Day and the recently published Sky Burial, which I'm excited to get. Did I mention she was the recipient of the 2007 Guggenheim Fellowship in Poetry? She was. I don't want to take too much of her time, so in closing, let me just say that Dana's poems, like little bits of saying lit by the unsaid, will haunt you, stay with you for months, or in my case, even years, their images invading the once silent spaces over and over again. That's because Dana is a rare poet who, like Emily Dickinson, seems to write fully embracing and fully utilizing her imagination, sharing with us images most of us wouldn't have the courage to invoke, let alone invite into our minds. Dana's poems are enigmas born through close attention. To what, you ask? To everything. Visually, sonically, imagistically, metaphorically, on the body's surface and under the skin, her poems speak to us, wrench us out of a proverbial sleep, showing us what we might have seen if we had looked. Faculty, students, friends of the English Reading Series, get ready to be woken up. Please welcome Dana Levin.
Thanks for that introduction. And thanks to Kim and Patrick for helping me get here. And thank you for sitting in the audience. I really appreciate it. And luckily I'm a little blind, so those of you in the back, if you're really having a bad time, I won't be able to tell. So frown away. So this reading is a little bit of an ambush because I'm going to read to you from Sky Burial, and I need to give you some background, which is that in 2002, my parents died in very quick succession, within 6 months of each other. My father's death was expected. My mother's was very shocking. And then 4 years after that, my middle sister died. So also very swift and shocking. So I went from an immediate family of 5 to an immediate family of 2. Right now it's just me and my older sister. And all of the poems revolve around this experience. But the one assignment I gave to myself, and I don't really know why, was that I refused to write traditional elegies. I was not interested in lamenting the lost ones. I was interested in making a confrontation with death, which is going to greet us all at some point in some way. And because I'm very body-oriented, this meant that I did a lot of research into corpse decay, into the insect-cadaver relationship, and then cross-cultural approaches to burial and different religious ideas about the relationship between the soul and the body. So that's where these poems come from. At the same time, some people think some of these poems have funny moments. So if you think something is funny, please laugh. It's totally appropriate. You may also leave here going, there was nothing funny about that at all. So the first poem I'm going to read is the first poem in the book. It was actually the last poem I wrote for this book. It's called Augur. An augur in Roman times was someone who tried to tell the future by looking at the flights of birds. I think part of my own grieving process was to do a lot of reading and a lot of seeking, a lot of research. That was very solacing to me. And this poem is about that kind of seeking. And it kind of moves around in a lot of different places, but it starts with seeing a hawk perched on a hedge, and then it goes from there. This poem involves looking at the Penguin Book of Symbols, looking through the internet, the Latin Vulgate, and looking at the world as a text is another way I would think about it. Augur. Hawk perched low on a hedge of vine. On hunt for what hid in the tangle. The small citizens, mouse and gopher. Body of Ra, the hawk signified, Ra meaning the Egyptian god. In the symbol book, which I opened after climbing the stairs, after the hawk fanned out its banded tail like I should, pick a card. The book was a prisoner of my ardor for the dark. Through it I stalked, a seeker. It was a character out of a Victorian novel, symbol book, an imbecile, a Dutch inventor, saying, "You must bow to the hippogriff, half raptor, half horse. It must lower its head to your hand. Halcón pradeño, Mexicano, come to me for my winter ground," according to whatbird.com. Hawk perched low on a hedge of vine, going heel to toe so as not to startle. Cloud unhooding body of Ra, a pale pearl of winter sun. Renaissance printers often stamped their wares with a hooded falcon, emblem of the dungeoned seer. That hope for light, the darkened nourish. Closed books, post tenebras spiro lucem along the spine. I found the phrase in the Office for the Dead, in the Latin Vulgate, after darkness I hope for light. Then hell is my house, and in darkness I have made my bed. I thought of my father and mother and sister being dead. I was so sick of feeling anything about it. The hood stood for hope of liberty, of wanting to swoop and soar over enormous swells, as in my dream. I hovered high. I could see the mammals in the raucous waters, their slick skins of danger and wonder. My soul hath thirsted, the Vulgate said. He hath put a new song into my mouth. The hawk appeared, unhooded, an auspice from auspex, avispex, one who looks at birds. I'd been wanting to know if it was all right to live. An ascensional symbol on every level, the symbol book said. Body of Ra, solar victory, if one can believe the book of symbols. Also, I'm happy to take questions at the end of this. I meant to say that before. Okay, this next poem is called Cathartes Ora, and it is a rendition of Jator, which is a Tibetan burial practice, which means giving alms to the birds. That's what Jator means. In Tibet, it's on the Himalayan plain, which before global warming was frozen most of the time, so you couldn't bury people in the ground. Wood was scarce and very expensive, so cremation was reserved for those with money. So typically what your typical Tibetan did is strap the corpse of the deceased to their back and take them up to the ritual butcher, who would lay the body out on a stone and dismember it in a mandala pattern, and then to pound it up with yak butter and barley and tea and be fed to waiting vultures. Incredibly clean, incredibly economic. It was viewed that the birds, as they ate this paste, would be taking the souls of the dead away. And this poem is a rendition of sky burial. There's two words in here. She means eat in Tibetan, and shunyata means emptiness. And Cathartes Ora is the Latin name for the turkey buzzard. It means golden purifier. Sound of ripping paper through the corridor of joys. Someone keeps pushing the needle from the record, someone fallen in mid-song. Behold, golden purifier, opening its black wings to the sun. They took you in an ambulance even though you were dead. They took you, and my sister said, "Why are you saving her if she is dead?" She, curve of sky a crescent blade. Vultures wheeling on thermal parapets, shunyata, void that flays. Yak butter, barley flour, and tea, you watch him make the paste. Hanks of hair along the gully's seam. Hank of hair in the butcher's hand, he'll scrape the crown door clean. Help him now. Drag her over to the flat rock. It's porous, it will drink the stain. Tie to your waist a burlap sack, fit to your head an old surgical cap, wipe his flay blade clean. What is the body but a bag of alms for the infection eaters who will cleanse the corpse to the bone? Sever her arm. Pound it with the back of an axe. It's the pulp that sets the paste. Human barley cakes. Until she is the jellied wealth they dive for, heads featherless and slick. He's waving them away with a long white stick, your ritual butcher friend. You must finish. You must sever her head. What is an arm but an alm? Sound of ripping paper through the corridor of joys. Someone pushing the needle from the record, someone falling in mid-song. There is a law that one must put color to the lips of the dead, file them in the ground under a name, smash the skull for the eaters who will bear the used body away. You might feel grossed out. I often had to stop writing this poem as I was working on it because I would feel nauseous. That has never happened to me before. Why, you ask then, did you proceed? Two things. I don't know if any of you have had a loved one die and have gone to a traditional American funeral where someone's in an open casket and they have makeup on their face and they're dressed in their best clothes. And when you look in there, you know the soul is gone. And what is there is a meat suit that person used to wear that's been dressed up so that we don't have to really think about what happens to the body once the soul has left it. And that was the kind of confrontation I wanted to make. And there's a long religious tradition in Buddhism of monks meditating in graveyards and cemeteries to really understand the impermanent nature of the embodied soul on this plane. And I was very interested in that. I think I was so shocked by all those deaths in my family that doing this kind of work was the way that I was going to really accept what had happened and see what has happened. It's also very liberating to understand that this thing goes away. It really does. And so how are we going to live this life? That's the question, right? Since we're only here for a short period of time. All right, on to something less gross. The next poem I'm going to read is called Letter to GC, and this is where some of the technical issues of sky burial come forward. I was really sick of how I sounded on the page. I think that probably 90% of American poetry is written in a very narrow tonal range. Maybe those of you who are writing are like, I've got a voice. I'm supposed to find my voice. Then I'm supposed to put it on the page. Well, what happens if you've found your voice and you've written like that for 20 years? I don't know, might be kind of boring, might be kind of dull. And I also noticed that in my life, I had tons of different ways of sounding. When I was angry, when I was sad, when I was happy, when I was confused, and yet none of those tonal qualities would make it into my poems. My poems sounded more like the first two poems I just read. So I thought, how am I gonna shake this up? And I had an email correspondence that I still maintain with a poet named G.C. Waldrop. And we talk about all sorts of stuff in this correspondence, and I really liked some of the ways the sentences sounded and knew that they were not like how I sounded on the page. So I took my half of the correspondence, 25 pages, and I just kept whittling it down and whittling it down and whittling it down, privileging any phrasing or sentences that weren't like what I usually put in my poems. And I got a one-page distillation out of those 25 pages. And what was fascinating is that it's an absolute accurate distillation of everything GC and I talk about when we write. So if you're ever sick of yourself on the page or you want to shake something up, go to your journal or to letters or to emails, and you can use that as raw material, you know, to sort of collage lines. So this poem is called Letter to GC. It'll move around a little bit, but hopefully it'll make some sense. Okay. I say most sincerely and desperately, Happy New Year! Having rowed a little farther away from the cliff, which is my kind of religion, adrift in the darkness but readying oars. How can there be too many stars and hands, I ask you? I would be disingenuous if I said being understood is not important to me. Between the ceiling of private dream and the floor of public speech, between the coin and the hand it crosses, mercantilists and governors and preachers alike, the imagination and its products so often rebuff purpose, and some of us don't like it and want to make it mean, I would never shoot you, even if you were the only meat around. Anyway, snowbound sounds gorgeous and inconvenient, like the idea of ending on the rhyme of psychics and clients, though I too privilege the shiny. And of course I want to be approved of so much, despite the image I've been savoring, the one of the self-stitching wound. Yes, I want to write that self-healing wound poem, the one with cocoon closed up with thorns. We are getting such lovely flourishes from our poets, fathomless opportunities for turning literacy into event. It's the drama of feeling we find such an aesthetic problem these days. Okay, this next poem is called Pure Land, and Pure Land is a name for a heaven. In Buddhism, there's about 100 million heavens that you can go to, depending on the kind of life that you lived. And Pure Land is one of them. And Buddhism is also interesting because they often pair their deities. So there's mother, father, gods. There's always a god that has what they call a consort, a woman consort. So that's referenced at the beginning of this poem. And then a little vision of the afterlife comes forward. It's not so pleasant, depending on who you were, but Pure Land. It starts in the real world, autumn. Shedding so glorious, Buddha of the autumn jinns, his consort golden sensation. Oh, chamisa's referenced. It's a plant. It smells really intense. It smells like honey. Then you get next to it and you're like, whoa. I'll start over again. Pure Land. Shedding so glorious, Buddha of the autumn jinns, his consort golden sensation. You'd brushed by chamisa, a honey-palaced air, as if a smell could be a place, musk-heavy and gold, a glorious, pure land. Who could breathe in it? Who got to breathe in it without a body, dimmed bulb of form? Could the dead breathe, scorched and bright, in a sun come to scour the skin from each waiting face, snip the lid from each sleepless eye, saying, you who'd wanted to feel the true burn, who'd wanted not meat but light, you must settle with your deck of flesh, an antique notion, I know. So when your parents die, and if you had a really difficult relationship with them, the most shocking thing is to realize how much you loved them. That definitely happened to me. So this poem comes from that, and it's called, I can never pronounce this. Do you guys know the immortal fluid that flows through the veins of the Greek gods? Is that ichor or ichor? Ichor. This poem's called Ichor. And it's almost like being a reverse junkie. Like instead of like putting a drug in your vein, what's happening in this poem is that the fluid is coming out, and there's a realization. And the word vena cava is in here, which is like the main vein that cleans out the blood. And I may not be pronouncing that right either. Iker. The father died, and then the mother died. And you were so addicted to not feeling them, you told no one about the clamp inside, around the vena cava, dam against the blood's trash. But I've got you now. Trust at the waist in a wooden chair, odor of spice and oranges, clove-pierced, incandescent stores to light our lab's decor. Here, I saved this just for you. Beetle cleaned and sharp at the tip, the finger that shook in your set face from the hand that smoothed your hair. Make a fist. Wrap the tube round your fleshy arm. Pull the black rubber tight. Will we finally see the sludge of their accumulated mouths? Ah, you've said, how they poisoned me. Pierce in with your mother's finger bone. Taste the slow up well. Sweet, sweet. Surge ambrosial and clear. A honey, an ichor from those who waited long in your veins. You liked that one. All right. How are you guys doing? Are we okay? Okay, you don't have to clap, honestly. I'm really curious, but I'm just hoping you're not falling asleep. Okay. So this next poem really happened. It's called Among the Living. It's in prose. A young woman flops down at a table, asking loudly, "Is there a pecan pie today?" Broken protocol. You're supposed to go up to the counter, place your order, wait for your food, and when it's ready, take it to your seat to eat. The cook says, "No, pecan cheese today," and the woman at the table starts crying. You think, yes, she is crazy. And then she starts looking through the trash, calling out brightly, "I'm just looking for a piece of pie." Everyone ignores her. The three older dykes next to you, the Albanians behind the counter, you with a fork in your blueberry pie. Everyone watches her intently through the backs of their heads, foreheads homing in on her like radar, thinking, yes, she is crazy. She finds the potato salad in the container you threw away and draws it carefully out of the trash. She takes the croutons from the Caesar salad you'd ordered and pours them on top. She keeps jerking slightly, a spastic electricity in her head, neck, arms, legs. You can't finish your pie. You get up and put on your coat, everyone watching you intently with their foreheads. You take your pie to her, say, "Do you want the rest of this? I can't eat anymore." And she nods her head shyly, looks up and then down, then up at your face, says, "I thought you had blue eyes." And you say, "No, they're brown." And she says, "My friend wanted to have purple eyes, but something went wrong." And you say, "Really?" And throw your coffee in the trash. And she dives after it saying, "Oh, is that tea?" And you say, "Oh, I'm sorry." Everyone ignoring you, listening to you, chins pressed to their chests. And she stops digging, squints up in wonder, says, "Your hair is streaming out in waves." And you know she means you are a person, a fact as blinding as the sun. Another prose poem that rhymes. The water. An astrologer told you, a glorious sun and a darkening daughter, and there she was, our R, for the fourth time that dinner hour, filling to the brim a tall plastic cup, then sweeping it full to the floor. The night you were dying, though no one knew, hurling cups of ice at each other until you gasped, doubled over. You never missed a fight, drowned girls who yearned to talk to each other. She was autistic, 15, a torment, and you were her mother. Elephant-legged and kidneys failing, 20 liquid pounds in each thigh. R fills to the brim a tall plastic cup. The drowned speak through the water. I wrote a lot of poems from dreams. This one's a dream. The Mentor. The mentor was in town to give a lecture. He was staying in my apartment. Too sick to attend, his wife stayed behind and I to nurse her. That night, the mentor still away, curled in pain, she crept to my room to sleep with me. Hunched in bed, she cried and shook, and in the morning, when I woke up, she was dead. I cradled her dead body in misery, for now I had to tell the mentor. I tracked him to a diner and found him in a booth drinking coffee. He was jovial, began showing me a collection of organa, eggs, seashells, stones, pond water in jars. I grab his hand mid-flourish, say, "Have you seen your wife?" And he looks confused, something gassing his eyes. He says, "Is she gone?" Getting upset, and then smiling, saying, "When she comes back, I don't think she'll come back as a person. I think she'll come back as her clothes. She loved them so, the threads, the dyes." Then he is staring into a tin can full of water, murky water, almost red, and I know this will be our science, mourning her. Can you hear me? Okay, is that all right? All right. Okay, back to the gross, which I kept periodically visiting. This poem is called Pyro, and I'm not sure, this poem just assaulted me. I had to write it. It rhymes. And it's about a little boy who probably lives in poverty and in an industrial city along a river that's pretty industrially destroyed, and he likes to wander around the banks of that river and find cool trash and stuff like that. But one of the things he also comes across is dead animals, stray dogs, someone shot up with a BB gun, all that kind of stuff, and he decides that he needs to start burying these animals. And the way he goes about this is Viking burial. You know, the way the Vikings used to dispose of their dead is they'd put them on a boat and they'd set the boat on fire and they'd set it off into the ocean. So this little boy decides that that's what he has to do with these animals. And of course he gets caught, and this whole story just arose. So I don't know why, but here's the poem, Pyro. You're gonna strike the match. You're gonna strike it. Flame the bank up into pods of fire. Be a master hand. And someone said, gasoline. Someone said, we have to change the images inside their heads. Said, gasoline? And motor oil he bought at a mini-mart. And the cat said don't, even though it was dead, and the squirrel said don't, and the little dog missing an eye and a leg, even though they were dead, said don't. But you did it anyway. And someone said, that boy is sick. And someone said, it was kind of pretty when you didn't know what it was from the road. Hours now by the trashed banks, counting the colored glass. Brown for beer, green for the fizzy water, clear for anything, and taillights smashed, cars mucked like big cats, trapped in tar, who ate the flesh right off their legs. If they were lighter, they could hurry home. They could float on home. Killed cat dead at the end of your stick. Who could do that? Shot in the head. Like in the shows where the cop cleans up his town, then the ambulance comes for the drowned. You felt bad, so you did it. You thought it was pretty, so you did it again. You felt charged and buoyant as you picked your way home to the blue-lit, fatherless den. So you did it again. The BB'd mutt, leg smashed, home bum toasting you with his beer as you dragged it to the sludgy bank, the match, the gas, the pile of tires someone had dumped. Were you dumped, you had asked, after another one left, and she had slapped you and slapped. You were an ambulance. You could see she had drowned. like in the shows where the warrior collects his dead and brings them to the shore to burn them in their body boats, release the spiritual smoke. And the parents said, didn't he have a house key around his neck? Didn't he have a pager, an electrical tether to a list of chores, and a stocked refrigerator? And the teacher said, yes, but what were the images inside his head? They see it and they make it be. And you put it in a tire, your Viking boat. You set it on fire and it kept afloat as it sailed down the river to the heaven of not being here. The charisma of the doctor. Radiance dissolves like a bromide in the gut, which is why the food you eat hasn't killed you yet. Meridians where the long needles go in to turn some kind of dial. I can see from that rash in your navel that you've hooked your tube to the mother drug. Give up sugar and make room for God. Actually really happened. It was the strangest thing. After my mother died, I got this rash in my belly button that would not go away. And it drove me nuts, and then I realized it must have been, in a way, psychosomatic, because my mother was gone. Aztecs. Can't have a book that doesn't go to Aztecs. Okay. So the Aztecs practiced human sacrifice very regularly, at least once a month. Seriously, it was the way that they honored their pantheon of gods. And the way that these sacrifices went was quite gruesome and baroque, elaborate. And I got really interested in this god called Xipi-Totec. And Xipi-Totec is a god of spring. And the Aztecs believed that spring started when the first little green tendril came out of the seed. That was the beginning of spring. So something emerging and shucking its previous container. Well, how do you think they worshipped this god? They would capture warriors from some other tribe. They'd have a fake battle where the warrior was tied to a stone and was given a sword made out of wood to fight warriors who had real swords and could move around, so you know how that went. And once the captive was slain, his skin was flayed. It was dyed yellow, and ritual priests would wear these skins for 20 days. It was considered good luck to encounter a priest walking around a neighborhood and to touch these skins. It was considered that, you'd have a good harvest, a good year. And of course, these skins were decaying and falling apart the entire time the priests were wearing them. And then at the end of the 20 days, there was a ritual where the priests would take off these skins, and the idea was that a new person had arisen. So I decided that the Aztecs were actually quite literal-minded. So the little tendril comes out of the seed, therefore the human being needs to come out of some old skin. So we'll come up with this thing. This poem talks about Xipi, but it also is trying to integrate the death of my sister after 4 years of the shock of my parents dying. And, sort of in those 4 years, feeling like I was okay, I'm ready to live life again, and my parents are dead, and I'm really ready to move forward. And then when my sister died, it was like just being slapped back down. So how do you renew when loss and suffering is around you everywhere? There's a lot of researched material in here, and I'm not going to cue it because I'll just be sitting here going like this, and it'll be really distracting. But hopefully you'll be able to tell what I imported from other sources. Maybe you won't. In honor of Xipe. Oh, and the word March is in here, and I mean the month, not marching. Xipi-Totec, Aztec god of spring. Slicked with a birther's goo, it gleams up green from the ground. Little blade, how much toil to split the sealed doors of the mother, and scrape up through rock and clay the hard, sharp march of the ground. Our little God, our flayed lord. That's what Shipi-Totec means, our flayed lord. Shipi-Totec appears in Aztec art as a human figure wearing a tunic of human skin. The hand skins flop prominently below his elbows, and his human face, usually grinning, peers out through the eye slits and mouth hole of a skinned face mask. He was a god of transitions, oppositions, after which the rotting skin was removed and a new human being appeared. In the shimmer, their hummingbird cloaks their plumed heads as they ran towards slaughter. Flowers in riot on a field. They flayed the slain captive skins and wore them, dyed golden clothes, to impersonate spring's skinless lord. Conjure a power I wanted, to make the corn stand up. Piercing the hard pan inside my head, new self, green and scored. Died. My sister died. In the 4th year of parentless night. Aztec blood drinking, why should I oppose it? Or put down my proper terror of the earth? They each of them lived in an eating world, members of the wheel of mouths, owned implements of auto-sacrifice, a thorn, a carved bone. It was a sacred gift to pierce the soft tissue, feed the earth as the earth fed you. And so gain power over the killing wheel, not you, the gods in chorus. When my sister died after my parents died, stalking your family like a serial killer, someone said. Death is a serial killer, I had said when my sister died. It was called Tlacashipi-Hualitzli, which means skinning of men, and was the first feast of the year within the number of their calendar, celebrated every 20 days. And the festival of Tlacashipi-Hualitzli before the time of sowing. Who have studied this divinity and his strange ceremonial and concluded. An agricultural rite in which the skin of the victim represented the husk of an ear of corn about to ripen, like Prosperpine, sick. Plants change with the conditions. For the sun, they're lifting cotyledons. Light being at home in their bodies, and the way they turn from the dark when brought in to winter. Half dying, half spreading their green hands, day, day, day. And when the priest thrust up the still steaming heart, the crowd lifted ears of corn, saying, "Thy precious water hath come down from Copan. It hath made the cypress a quetzal." Plants converting light by a windowsill. I was tending them, those Shipes spring's excruciates, easing the blinds to bend the sun into their green city, onto transcripts of birdsong, gods of rain and war. To loved was loved, an alien power under which, decreed, all would thrive, shocked into green. Okay, I just have 2 more. This is called Bardo. Bardo literally means thrown in between, and Buddhism has this idea that when you die, the soul travels for 49 days through the Bardo realms, and it'll either reincarnate into a new body or it'll go off to nirvana. And Tibetan Buddhist ritual has, you're supposed to do a certain song every day for 49 days to help the soul on its way so it doesn't incarnate into a life of more suffering. What you should imagine for this poem is that your heart is broken, literally, and it's on the kitchen table, and someone's giving you instructions as to how to enter it. And once you enter it, as a little teeny human being, once you enter it, you're in a whole strange bardo realm where you're looking for the dead mother, and then you find her. Bardo. You don't have to break it. Just give it a little tap. Tap, tap. See? There's the crack. And if you pry it a little with the flat end of that spoon, you'll be able to slip yourself through. To the woods where you're walking, crushed ice above you like a layer of sky. Some sun under it, making it gleam. Some snow under it, bloodless and bright, in the fissured heart, the winter morgue of its imagined land. Where you can find her, sprawled face down in the snow, bracing herself up, a puff of ice at her chin, then seizing and dying all over again. Automaton, you prop her up, and it's like shaking a doll. How dare it? How dare it? What good is she for, there in her dying machine? You push her shoulders back against the trunk of the tree, her chest's so cold it cracks, so you can slip yourself through to the woods she's been walking, wondering where the living have gone. Okay, for this last poem, you're a graduate student at the University of Knoxville, Tennessee in forensic anthropology. And part of what happens to you as a grad student in that program is that there is a 1-acre plot of land called the Body Farm where you study corpse decay because you want to be someone who works at CSI. Or Bones or something like that. You want to be a consultant for one of those shows. So how do they get trained? They have to study corpses. And so at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, there's this place called the Body Farm where there's corpses in various states of decay, underwater, on top of the ground, under the ground, and you have to go out there and, see what you can learn. So in this poem, you're about to do homework. There's a mention here about bees and blowfly larvae. Bees love to eat blowfly larvae, and blowfly larvae is usually deposited in the nostrils and at the back of the throat of corpses. And so studying that stuff can tell you how long a body's been dead, perhaps how they died, all that kind of stuff. This is why forensic anthropologists study this stuff. And bees also deliver pollen to the corpse as they're doing this. So studying it's like the corpse becomes the landscape. So studying the landscape of the corpse begins the way that you can maybe solve a crime. So here's your homework. This poem is called Spring. The sun in shafts and spades. Through the pine and birches, little breeze setting off the leaves. Their golden green increase. Pollen to the air, its colonial dream of a new imperium of trees. Snap against the wrist skin. And then you press down on the tongue with your gloved thumb to let the honeybee show you the way. The dark tunnel paths from light to light. Flay the face and scoop out the eyes. You'll see. Bees in a cloud round your hand. Egg herder, your smell synonymous with treasure. Shining a light at the back of the throat, blowflies and liquid pearls the bees murder to eat. And all at the lips and nose a yellow dust, pollen they have delivered. You scrape it into a little sack. Ripple and snap. Bend to the O of the rigored mouth. Listen. Plastic bags like souls caught in trees. what to harvest from the sloughed-off suits of the dead. Like seashells cupping the ghost tongue of the sea, their black mouths speak. You crouch to the hum with a bag and a blade. You, the god it sways. Thanks.